Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Barbados Labour Party. Good evening, Barbados. Happy Valentine's to all of you. And you have chosen to spend Valentine's night with a loving party, the Barbados Labour Party. But tonight is serious business. It's serious business. 5 years ago, the Democratic Labour Party came to you and promised you pathways to progress. And there began the greatest deception inflicted on the innocent citizens of a country in the 21st century. Over the past year, 5 years, they have inflicted the greatest deception on the people of Barbados. And I say so because at that time, they promised you a number of things. They promised you pathways to prosperity. They promised you that they would reduce the cost of living. They promised you that they would reduce the cost of living. Deception. They promised you that they would bring good governance and transparency to the affairs of this country. Deception. They promised you that they were going to build a society and not only an economy. And in that regard was the greatest deception of the three. And in terms of building a society, you need to deal with issues like the education of your citizens, the health care of your citizens, the provision of housing for your citizens, the provision of social services, and the provision of law and order in your society. And in each of these areas, you could speak at length and show the deception which has occurred. But tonight, I am going to deal with health care and what has been happening in health care in this country over the past 5 years as the DLP deceived you in terms of what they were doing and what they had planned to do in health care in this country. They came to you and told you they were going to transform the delivery of health care. And what did they do? And remember, I said they were building a society. And the first thing they did was the uncaring and inhumane and draconian measures which they introduced in terms of the Barbados Drug Service and the difficulties that were inflicted on the elderly in this country. And they tell you about building a society. Thousands of elderly persons, the builders of this society, were as a result forced to pay towards their medication or stand in lines for hours at the polyclinic pharmacies, oftentimes not able to get their medication because the polyclinic pharmacies were out of the medication, and they were told rather than getting 4 weeks supply, they would be given a week or 2 weeks and told to come back. Poor elderly people, those who could not withstand that in terms of standing and waiting and returning, paid out of their pensions at the private pharmacies for their medication. And a lot of them could not afford and still cannot afford to pay for their medication. Many of them have had to pick medication off of their prescription. And I explained to you, some of them have their 4 or 5 items and they cannot afford the handling fees. They have to tell the pharmacist, give me 2 or 3. They have to choose between paying for their medication, paying for their food, and paying looking after their housing. And as a result, and I have no apology, several persons in this country have been affected, and several of them are no longer with us. And that is wrong. And if a government says it is building a society, it has to pay more attention to the health and welfare of the elderly citizens. And on that alone, the DLP stands to be condemned and should be rejected by all of you. They spoke about the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And after 5 years, this is what we have to show. This is what we have to show. This is what we have to show. The operating theaters in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital last week. And they tell you, and the minister boasts about transforming health care. Buckets collecting water, leaking from the roof outside of an operating theater where the citizens of Barbados have to go for surgery. Look at that. What is in the operating theater last week? Look at that. A bucket in the theater collecting water. And we have a minister of health, if that is what you can call him, speaking on everything. And in terms of the hospital, telling you that he has improved the conditions. Tell that to the persons whose surgeries were canceled last week. Tell that to the suffering persons. Tell that to the persons whose surgeries were canceled. And he tells you that they have refurbished the cafeteria. They have changed the windows. They have built a fountain. They have covered the entrance. Window dressing, deception, not dealing with the issues of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and the delivery of health care, but deceiving you. Deceiving you. And in that institution, where as I speak, there's a shortage of alcohol and gauze and sutures and gloves. You can have an individual charge for over $500,000. And not a word from the minister. Not a word. But he needs to tell you, because he likes to speak about everything. Everything. He needs to tell you what is the relationship between the individual and him. He needs to tell you how the individual who is being held for over $500,000 missing from the QEH got his job. He needs to tell you what is the individual's relationship with the Democratic Labour Party. And he needs to tell you how the individual lost his previous job. But I don't expect him to answer you, because he will deceive you. But these are the things that need to be addressed. How can you build a society when an infant can die in the QEH for lack of a piece of equipment costing $10,000 and $50,000 can be spent to bring someone back home by air ambulance who happens to have the surname of a member similar to that of a member of the board? Do you understand the type of society they were telling you about? Not caring, not interested in the ordinary citizens of this country. But they fooled you. They were going to transform it. That you're only spending 4 hours in A&E, and they say so on CBC with Glib. And as I speak to you, if you go to the QEH now, you will find people in A&E who have been there from yesterday morning. But I say to you, I say to you, there is a better way. And we in the Barbados Labour Party promise you a better way and a better tomorrow. And so you will see in our manifesto that we seek to address a number of these issues. We in the Barbados Labour Party are clear. We are clear that in terms of the provision of health care to the citizens of Barbados, a fundamental tenet of our policy is that in relation to the provision of health care for the elderly, the poor, the disabled, and those with special needs, that they should have acceptable health care provided to them by the state free of cost, and they can run any ad about privatization. That is what we speak to. That is what we have done in the past, and that is what we will do in the future. And in this regard, a BLP government that is a return to government will amend the draconian measures introduced by the DLP government in the Barbados Drug Service and will ensure that all pensioners receive their medication free at charge at the pharmacy of their choice. We are also cognizant. We are also mindful of the scourge of the chronic diseases, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, cancer, and we plan to address these issues. We established the Chronic Diseases Commission in 2007. And we had agreed to, in October 2007, to remove the VAT, the import duty and VAT, from a basket of goods in October 2007. This government that is interested in building a society has not found it within the hearts of any of the ministers to implement that policy. I pledge to you this evening that with the return of the BLP to government, we will remove the import duty and VAT from a basket of goods which support healthy eating, to include diabetic supplements, low sugar and low fat snacks, sugar substitutes, cereals, peas, beans, food supplements, multivitamins, and vegetarian burgers, etc. Those are the sort of caring things you do when you're concerned about the health of your citizens of your country. In terms of the QEH, redevelopment, we stated in our last election and in our manifesto that we were committed to building a new state-of-the-art hospital. The Dems criticized it, and over the past 5 years, it has been verbal gymnastics when it came to what will happen with the hospital. You had the late David Thompson saying one thing, David Estwick saying another. You had Thompson saying something different. The year later, Donville was saying something different. Up to now, a minister of health, a parliamentary secretary, I believe that is what she's called, Miss Sandiford Garner, Sandiford or Salty or whatever she's called, with special responsibility for the hospital. And up to now, not a definitive statement on the QH. The Minister of Health had the temerity to come to you, the citizens, via CBC and tell you that Cabinet had agreed to the establishment of a hospital at Kingsland. A lie, a monumental lie, utter rubbish, pure deception. As I speak, there is a committee within the Ministry of Health which has been meeting, looking at the possible sites for the location of a new hospital, and they have not yet made a decision. You understand when I speak about deception, what I mean. But I'm telling you that the Barbados Labour Party is committed to the building of a new general hospital for Barbados. We recognize that these are dire economic times, and we might not be able to do it immediately. But we tell you, and we give you this, that as soon as conditions improve, we will work assiduously to establish a new state-of-the-art hospital to ensure that you, the citizens of Barbados, get the best possible care and are not exposed to what we see that is happening in the hospital under the management of the Democratic Labour Party. In terms of the polyclinic system, they told you that they were going to extend the opening hours of all polyclinics. That clinics across this country were going to be open 24 hours, 7 days a week. Deception. Not a single hour of any polyclinic has been extended in the past 5 years of the Democratic Labour Party. Not an hour. I am here to tell you tonight that we extended the opening hours at Morris Bayer and Randall Phillips, and a BLP on return to government will extend the opening hours at all polyclinics. Before we demitted our office, and this might surprise you, we had plans, we had made provision for the completion of the St. John Polyclinic. And I give you the pledge tonight, because obviously, in 5 years, the DLP cannot get the polyclinic completed. And I pledge to you tonight that a BLP government on return to government will ensure that the St. John Polyclinic is completed and is open. I don't know who will open it. What I can tell you is that we recognize the importance of the polyclinic system to the delivery of a comprehensive health care to this country. And in addition to extending the opening hours, we will ensure that those polyclinics are fitted with X-ray facilities, with ultrasound facilities, with asthmatic facilities to ensure that a wider variety of care can be provided in those settings and so ease the load off of the QEH. In addition, those of you from St. Joseph, anyone from St. Joseph? In the development of the Tamarind Hall project, I believe it is called the Eric Holder Complex, there was provision for a polyclinic, and it did not materialize. We pledge that on return to government, the Barbados Labour Party will construct a polyclinic at Tamarind Hall, St. Joseph, as previously planned. Ladies and gentlemen, I have said enough tonight, but I want to tell you that the Barbados Labour Party understands your needs in terms of health care. We understand what is needed in terms of building a society. We want to promise you a better tomorrow, and so I am asking you to take us with you and let us take you on this journey to build a better Barbados tomorrow for your children. And I'm asking you to go out in your thousands and vote from 6 to 6 on the 21st of February to ensure that Barbados is rid of a deceptive government, a government of deception, and you welcome a new era with Owen Arthur and the Barbados Labour Party. I thank you. And
we bringing it home.